Um, Another day, another chapter. So, for those of you just joining me, I am currently reading manuscripts. Yes, there are also several cats, so just don't worry, she's fine. She just needed to go do whatever she's doing right now. Any rate, like I said, for those of you just joining, I am currently reading manuscripts of my dad's and doing live editing while I'm reading them. Tonight I am on to chapter 7 of The Sword and the Rose, and so I'm just gonna leap on in. Okay, chapter 7. A little better than a week and a half after Gwalsor's return from Gwilla's Hole, a messenger came in from Baron Wardwick. He carried Warwick's pennant, the wyvern in the flames, with a green branch tied to the shaft as a sign that he came in peace. He had with him only 2 men-at-arms and a page. "Don't be too ready to accommodate Warwick," warned Forsyth. "He surely knows as well as you know how weak we are, and depends on that to make us agreeable to whatever he suggests." Gwalsor nodded. "That was my impression, though I've never met the man. Well, let's talk to his messenger." The messenger was a tall man of middle age, and with the scars of many fights showing on his arms and face. He came into the audience hall, approached Gwalsor's chair, and bobbed his head in a sketchy bow. "And what can I do for Baron Warwick?" The messenger was caught off guard. These sorts of things usually called for introductions and pleasantries, discussions of health of various family members before business considered. For a moment this messenger hesitated, then continued. "Sir, I am Hathis Darwishrelant. Lord Warwick sends me to ask you that you come to meet him at Gwilla's Hole to discuss our mutual boundary." Gwalsor shook his head. "I regret I cannot spare the time to discuss something that was settled long ago. I have too much work to do settling this barony to rights. If Warwick wishes to come to me, I may spare time for discussion." "Unfortunately, if it involves the bury of Gwilla's Hole, as I said, that matter was settled long ago." "But the border has changed, sir." "By whose writ? When this barony was entrusted to me, there was no mention of bits being chopped off to aggrandize my neighbors." The messenger paused. Gwalsor could see the man's dilemma. He knew the basic point of this baron's claim, but it was only his place to pass a message. Indeed, to do so might make trouble for him when he returned home. Sir, I will not take your message back to Baron Warwick. I fear he will not be happy to hear it." Gwalsor waved his hand in a calculatedly negligent fashion. "Some people don't always get what they desire, do they? Tell Lord Warwick that I would welcome a visit from him, but if he wishes to talk of a rearrangement of borders, I fear he will have little joy of it." When the messenger had gone, Forsyth talked to Gwalsor privately. "You've been trained for the barony, my lord. A man wouldn't be saying that by watching you," he grinned. "Carelessly wave your arm in his face, tell him with no words. Look, I won my barony saving the king's life. How far you be pushing before I gain a little help you might not wish to fight?" Gwalsor smiled back at him. "Anything that makes Warwick stop and think of it will allow us that more time to prepare for him. And in that regard, how do our preparations go?" Forsyth grew more serious. "I'll not hide it from you, Lord. We're not in a good position. Baron Raphael marched off with upward of 300 trained men. Of those, only 41 have made their way back. That's counting those who reported in, and those who still be hale enough to fight again. If the number increases if we count those too ill or too crippled to fight, and those who, for one reason or another, did not report in. Of those last, we only know gossip. You'll understand. We might round them up and force them to serve, but taking trained men away from their tasks to scrape together folk already proven of doubtful quality would do more harm than good. I see. Gwelsor looked down at his left wrist for a bit and then looked up. I wonder how many of the ill or crippled might be capable of a task or two. Tasks which might free up an able-bodied person to do for some other work. Did you have anything special in mind, Lord? They might twine bowstrings or trim arrow shafts, perhaps even do the fletching of arrows and crossbow quarrels. Have a talk with some of the craftsmen for it. Even use my name as a spur if necessary. See who might be open to the idea at all. Yes, my lord. So what's he calling us together for, Toss? Man, you was there with me when he came in. You be knowing as much as I do. Summon your people to gather down by my quarters, he said. I've something to show you. So I summoned them. And we be gathering. And we be finding out what for in due course, as he no doubt tell us. You don't suppose he'd be planning to take over? Tostag, who'd been wondering just that, frowned. He might not. Let's not be driving the ox tail till it be hitched, eh, man? Can't say as I like being ordered by a stinking wizard, muttered Manic, in a low voice enough that Tostag could ignore it. By this time they were, along with the rest of the bandits, at the rude shack that was the wizard's quarters. Hensedge was standing there waiting for them. The magician surveyed them and nodded. I have things set up around back, and I will show you what I will show you, and then I'll explain to you why it is that I have called you here. Some of you may have questions, and if they have any sense to them, I will answer them after the demonstration. Now, please follow me. He turned and walked around the shack, and the bandits followed in a loose mob, full of mutterings and half-signs against evil. Behind the shack was a figure carved in the sod, seemingly a many-pointed star, with candles of strange hues burning at the precise tip of each of the points, always directly opposite a point on the other side. There were hints of scent in the air, where the smokes of the candles drifted, some sweet, some acrid, some with a trace of putrefaction. Within many divisions of the figure were what seemed to be words, and though Tostag was near illiterate, he knew enough to know that some of them were not in the common script. The words appeared to have been painstakingly done by allowing sand of several colors and what appeared to be salt to drop from the magician's hand. Tostag pushed his back against the rough logs of the cabin to guard his back. Visions fleeted through his mind of the log's growing hands at the sorcerer's command, but he couldn't watch against every possibility. The wizard gave a thin smile, and Tostag had a feeling that Hensedge was well aware of what he felt, and amused at it. The wizard spoke. To reassure you all, let me say first that this is meant to do no harm to any of you, nor shall it do harm to you unless you trespass within this sign, or speak at certain times of the spell. I have completed all preparations, recited the first of the spells, and all that remains is for me to speak a few more, and it will be completed. As to what I'm up to, I had to leave certain things behind me when I left home. I'm about to summon one of these things here, in great part because it was the culmination of my studies, and I will require it to go on to greater things. Now, stand still and be quiet. He stooped, picked up a handful of sand, and, letting it pour from his hand, drew a curling rune in one section of the figure. The air became warm and still. He raised his hands and began chanting a strange little song. He repeated it several times, but it seemed to Tostig that the symbols of the song ran through his mind like water, and his mind would not retain them. There was a cloud rising in the middle of the figure now. The wizard stopped his chanting and called out a single word. Orthez! The cloud in the middle of the figure billowed up suddenly and then blew away, and a man stood there. There was more muttering among the bandits, and even more frantic signs made against evil. When the smoke cleared completely, Tostig saw what first seemed to be a brownish skeleton. A further look showed that it was not a skeleton, but a man, carved out of wood. The skeleton effect was mostly caused by the fact that the arms and legs were carved plainly, as though they might be bones, though forearms and lower legs were single pieces, not two bones, as in a human. The hands and feet were also carefully carved and joined, giving the impression of bones. The magician's voice spoke out, cutting through the babble. It is not a man, it is not really living. It merely a wooden representation, which I have animated by magic. And that should be making us all feel better about it, wizard? Almost as if he's heard Tostig's thought, Hansage turned his eyes toward the bandit chief. This animation will do none of you any harm if you leave it alone. The reason I called you here was to watch me summon it. So that you would all know that it belongs to me, and when seeing it upon its tasks, none of you will do anything stupid such as attacking it. It will respond to simple commands, but it only heeds commands in my native language, so none of you need try giving orders to it. I also imagine that at some time or other, one of you is likely to try and strike it with a hand or a weapon. It is protected by magic, and attempts to harm it will not succeed. The figure itself will not strike back, but the spells will indeed give a lesson to those too stupid to remember my words. So when you see it on its tasks, leave it be. That is all. You may all go back about your business. Tostig, would you please stay behind? Tostig shot a glance at Manic, who almost nodded imperceptibly. The wizard might be going to try to take over the band, but it seemed more likely he'd have done away with Tostig while the men were still awed by the magic. Well, they'd see about that. When the last of the still quiet bandits had trooped back around the wizard's shack, Hansage looked at Tostig. No, he said sardonically, you are still in charge of your bandits. All I wanted to do was, as I said, to discourage any of them from interfering with my work. Yes, I am well aware that someone, at some time, perhaps under the influence of too much drink, is going to lay hands on Yehor. He gestured at the wooden man, still standing in the middle of the figure. Perhaps even try to strike him with a weapon. The effect of the protective spells is not likely to kill the attacker, but it will cause him pain and render him unconscious for a while. I am telling you all this, though, I did not tell them, because it is useless to warn them. You, on the other hand, should know what is going to happen so that on that day you can take appropriate measures. What's appropriate measures? It means preventing the rest of your men from doing something altogether too stupid, such as attacking me. We coexist, you and I, because both of us help each other. But never deceive yourself. Just because I choose to accept the help you give me does not mean that I cannot do without it, nor that I will fail to defend myself if necessary. He paused and looked at Tostig and Manic. You understand? Oh, I be understanding for certain. Keep the lads in line, and if anyone be taking a swipe at Yehor and suffer for it, keep him from coming in for you instead. Good. Do you wish anything else, then? Tostig understood This is a sort of peace offering, though the meeting had been called by the wizard. Tostig was allowed to end it and thereby maintain his own authority. No, nothing else. Good. If you will excuse me, there are things yet to be seen here. Neither Tostig nor Manic spoke until they were back around the shack and some distance from the wizard. Mark me, Toss. He'll turn on us someday. Might be. Until that time, though, better we be keeping him on our side. Well, think on this, Toss. If he can be enspelling a wooden man to obey him, what's to stop him from enspelling a man of flesh and blood to do the same? And if one, why not many? Tostig made no answer. He had thought on it, and did not like the directions in which it drew his thoughts. Midsummer approached. Life on Grandel Barony went on, and word made its way around that the Baron would no longer tolerate laxness in the bringing in of tithes. It'll do some good, don't you think? Malgathop asked. We'll see when harvest time comes. Perhaps the Baron and his wild Lufetto will have to go calling on a few slackers and just to encourage the rest. There was a murder as well. A hedge wizard named Valwant, living in a hovel in the woods, making a living selling herbs and potions, love charms, luck charms, and, so the people said, the occasional curse. By the signs, it seemed that several people had broken into his place, tied him, and set the hut afire, leaving him to die. There are no suggestions as to who had done this, but the priests of the old gods told the people that it was said that Valwant had practiced divinations, and death was a mild enough punishment for that. I think that old Red Robe or his fellows have something to do with this, Malagotham said. Walsor remembered his conversation with the chief priest and wondered. These southern priests did seem to have a desire for power. What kinds of things might they do to build up their power base? He shook his head. It seems likely to you and me, but we have no evidence against anyone, let alone the priesthood. Maybe the Baron's wild Lufetta should do some little snooping around? Do what you can. If you find something to implicate our chief priest, or even some of his followers, then we will see what we will see. Jadal was at the door. My Lord Baron! Baron Wardick is at the gate! His eyes were wide. Welsor smiled. I'm sure he comes in peace, Jadal, or we'd have heard much sooner. Have Ralno show him to the audience chamber. The Baron looked at Malgathop and grinned briefly. Well, he's come to demand his rights, I suppose, and I shall have to disappoint him greatly by not allowing myself to be bullied. What do you think about maybe the Baron Wardick have an unfortunate accident on his way home? Gwalsor shook his head. Pleasing as that thought may be at the moment, it could well rebound on us. I understand that Baron Wardick's son is in some ways a worse man than his father, and is young enough just to make the kind of hot-headed and hasty attack as we are trying to prevent. Baron Barlant Dar Tabasur of Wardick was a man of medium height, his dark hair and beard liberally sprinkled with grey. Age had brought a thickening to his middle and more flesh to his face, but he did still give an impression of vigor. When the introductions and pleasantries had been taken care of, he got down to business immediately. Well, Baron Grandel, what is your explanation for this attack that you've made on me this spring? Baron Wardick, if your men come over my borders, they must expect to be attacked. Nonsense! The agreed border between us was at the Flingkettle Brook. My men were merely putting up a fortification to protect the border when they were attacked. And that is nonsense in its turn. The brook had changed its course this spring. And if it had changed back next year, what then? Would your men quietly abandon their fortification and go home? I think not. Baron Wardick's jaw thrust forward pugnaciously. You sound as though you're seeking a war. Gwalsor returned his look with a steady gaze of his own. Not at all. I'm seeking to prevent one by assuring by assuring you that if you invade my territory, you will not wish to do so with impunity. You will fight then over such a little bit of ground? I will fight any incursion on my territory. If I allow you or anyone to take a bit of my territory this spring, will I not find myself facing more troubles next spring, when the other people see me as being ripe for the plunder? You might well wish to count the cost, Lord Baron Grandal, before you thrust your barony into a war with mine. Have you the resources to fight such a war? Gwalsor rubbed absently at the leather cuff covering his left wrist. And you, Lord Baron Wardick, might wish to count the cost before you come to war with me. He saw Wardick grimace and knew that his gesture had done its part. If you refuse to be reasonable, then there is little left to be said, is there? I suppose not, so long as you consider reasonable to be synonymous to surrender. I will bid you good day then. But it was clear that Wardick wished him no good at all. It's late in the day to be starting out. Accept my hospitality for the night, at least. Wardick shook his head. No, not today. Another time, in other circumstances, perhaps. As they watched the Baron and his entourage depart, Gwalsor turned to Forraith and murmured, Well, what do you think, Marshal? Forraith ran a hand down his beard and said, He'll most probably try nothing serious this year. We may have a burned field or two, some stolen cattle, and that's about the size of it. Next year, though, when he realizes you haven't called the king on account of his nuisances, he'll likely do something more serious. Gwalsor nodded thoughtfully. I'd as soon he doesn't feel that he can annoy me with impunity. Suppose we make some preparations. At any rate, so that was all for tonight. And, I will talk to you again tomorrow when I continue on with the next chapter. So, have a good night.